The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of Apex Technologies as Rosa pushed her cleaning cart down the quiet hallway of the 32nd floor. Most employees had gone home hours ago, leaving behind empty coffee cups, crumpled papers, and the lingering scent of cologne and perfume that Rosa had come to associate with corporate success. For nearly 7 years, Rosa had cleaned these offices, learning the habits and routines of everyone who worked there. She knew which executives stayed late, which ones kept their desks meticulously organized, and which ones left behind evidence of rushed meals eaten while working through deadlines. The CEO, Richard Harmon, belonged to the last category. His office light was almost always on when Rosa arrived for her evening shift, and tonight was no exception. Through the glass wall of his corner office, Rosa could see him hunched over his laptop, his suit jacket draped over the back of his leather chair, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Rosa knocked gently on the doorframe before entering. "Good evening, Mr. Harmon. I'm here to clean." Richard looked up, distracted. "Oh, Rosa, yes, come in." He gestured vaguely toward the overflowing trash bin beside his desk. "Sorry about the mess. Big day tomorrow." Rosa nodded and began her usual routine, starting with the trash. As she moved about the spacious office, she couldn't help but notice something different about Richard tonight. His face was unusually red, and a thin sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. His breathing seemed a bit labored too, as if he'd just climbed several flights of stairs. These symptoms reminded Rosa of her father, who had suffered from heart problems for years before passing away. She hesitated, wondering if she should say something. Richard was not just her boss, but her boss's boss's boss. The cleaning company she worked for was contracted by Apex Technologies, and Rosa knew her place in the hierarchy. Still, she couldn't ignore what she was seeing. "Mr. Harmon," she said tentatively, "are you feeling okay? Your face is very red." Richard blinked as if surprised by the question. He touched his cheek absently. "I'm fine. Just working hard on this merger presentation." He reached for his water bottle, found it empty, and set it back down with a frown. Rosa moved to the small office kitchenette and refilled his water bottle from the filtered dispenser. "My father used to get red like that," she said, placing the water in front of him. It was his heart. He was working too hard and not taking care of himself. Richard took a long drink of water. "Thank you, Rosa, but I'm sure it's nothing serious. Just stress from this merger. The board meeting tomorrow will determine if we go ahead with it." He loosened his tie a bit. "I can't afford to be distracted right now." Rosa nodded, but her concern didn't fade. She continued cleaning, emptying the small recycling bin next to his desk, wiping down surfaces and straightening the magazines on the coffee table. All the while, she kept glancing at Richard, noting how he occasionally rubbed his left shoulder, how he seemed to be taking deeper breaths than usual. Her father had shown these same signs the week before his heart attack. She remembered how he had brushed off her mother's concerns, insisting he was fine, that it was just heartburn from her spicy cooking. By the time he admitted something was wrong, it had almost been too late. "Mr. Harmon," Rosa said again, her voice a bit stronger this time, "I think maybe you should see a doctor. These are the same signs my father had before his heart attack." Richard looked up, his expression shifting from distraction to mild annoyance. "I appreciate your concern, Rosa, but I'm perfectly fine. I had a physical just 3 months ago and everything was normal." He gestured to the stack of papers on his desk. "This merger has been in the works for over a year. If it goes through, it means job security for everyone at Apex, including the cleaning staff." Rosa felt her cheeks grow warm with embarrassment. Perhaps she had overstepped. After all, what did she know? She hadn't even finished high school, let alone medical school. Maybe it was just the lighting in the office making his face look redder than it was. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, returning to her cleaning cart. "I didn't mean to bother you." Richard's expression softened. "No, don't apologize. It's nice that you care." He took another drink of water. "But really, I'm fine. Just need to get through tomorrow, then I can take a break." As Rosa finished cleaning the office, she noticed Richard pulling a bottle of antacids from his desk drawer. He popped 2 into his mouth, grimacing slightly. She wanted to say something more, but held her tongue. The last thing she needed was to irritate an important client and risk her job. Outside Richard's office, Rosa paused by her cart, her mind still troubled. She'd been working at Apex long enough to know that Richard wasn't the type to take care of himself. He often ordered takeout for dinner, worked weekends, and she'd never seen him use the company gym on the 20th floor. She thought about her father again, how stubborn he had been, how he had ignored all the warning signs. Rosa considered calling her supervisor to express her concerns. But what would she say? That the CEO looked flushed? That he was taking antacids? It wasn't enough to sound an alarm, and she doubted anyone would take her seriously anyway. Instead, she decided to check on him one more time before finishing her shift. She filled a fresh pitcher of ice water and returned to his office, knocking softly. "I brought you more water," she said. "It's important to stay hydrated." Richard looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "Thank you, Rosa. You didn't have to do that." "It's no problem." She placed the pitcher on his desk, next to a framed photo of a young woman, presumably his daughter. "My father," she began, then hesitated. "My father ignored his symptoms too. He thought it was nothing serious." She met Richard's eyes directly. "Please, Mr. Harmon, if you start feeling worse, chest pain, dizziness, anything, promise you'll call someone." Richard held her gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I promise, Rosa. If anything changes, I'll call my doctor." She could tell he was just saying it to appease her, but it was the best she could hope for. "Good, that's good." She turned to leave, then added, "There's a good hospital just 3 blocks from here. Emergency room is on the ground floor, east entrance." Richard smiled faintly. "Let's hope I don't need that information." "Yes, let's hope." Rosa wheeled her cart out, closing the door behind her. As she moved on to clean the next office, Rosa couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Throughout her years of cleaning offices, she had developed a sense for the rhythms and patterns of the workplace. She noticed things others missed, the subtle signs of stress in how people organized their desks, the evidence of late nights and empty energy drink cans, the tension that hung in the air before big meetings or layoffs. Tonight, something about Richard's condition set off alarm bells in her mind. It wasn't just his flushed face or the way he kept rubbing his shoulder. It was a combination of small details that added up to a worrying picture. The way his breathing seemed slightly labored, the subtle wince when he reached for his water, the sheen of sweat despite the cool office temperature. Rosa finished cleaning the executive floor, her movements automatic after years of the same routine. Empty trash bins, wiped down surfaces, vacuum carpets, clean glass tables and doors. All the while, her thoughts remained with Richard. Should she have been more insistent? Should she call someone? But who would she call? She didn't have his personal number, and she doubted the security desk would bother the CEO with concerns from a cleaning lady. By the time Rosa reached the elevator with her cart, it was past 9 o'clock. Through the glass wall of his office, she could see Richard still working, his face illuminated by the blue light of his computer screen. He looked even more flushed than before, and he had removed his tie completely. As she watched, he stood up suddenly, placing one hand on his desk for support, the other pressed against his chest. Rosa's heart raced. Should she go back? As she hesitated, Richard seemed to recover, taking a deep breath and sitting back down. He reached for the water pitcher she had left, pouring himself another glass. Perhaps it really was just stress and exhaustion, Rosa told herself. Perhaps she was overreacting, seeing her father's symptoms in a man who was simply working too hard on an important presentation. The elevator doors opened, and Rosa reluctantly pushed her cart inside. As the doors closed, cutting off her view of Richard's office, she whispered a small prayer, something her grandmother had taught her, a plea for protection and health. She hoped that tomorrow, when she came back to clean, Richard would be fine. The merger meeting would be over, and her worries would prove unfounded. But as the elevator descended to the service level where the cleaning supplies were stored, Rosa couldn't silence the voice in her head that told her something was very wrong. The same voice that had tried to warn her father all those years ago. Rosa couldn't shake her worry about Richard as she continued her cleaning duties on other floors. The image of his flushed face and labored breathing kept returning to her mind. After finishing 2 more floors, she decided to check on him one last time before ending her shift. The 32nd floor was eerily quiet when she returned. Most of the offices were dark now, but light still spilled from Richard's corner office. Rosa approached quietly, not wanting to disturb him if he was on an important call. Through the glass wall, she could see that his condition had worsened in the hour since she'd last seen him. Richard had removed his button-up shirt and sat in just his undershirt. His face was now an alarming shade of red, and he was constantly wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Even from outside the office, Rosa could see that his breathing was uneven. He kept rolling his shoulders and rubbing his left arm, wincing occasionally as if in pain. Rosa knocked gently on the door frame. "Mr. Harmon? I'm sorry to bother you again." Richard looked up startled. His eyes seemed unfocused for a moment before he recognized her. "Rosa, I thought you'd gone home." "I was finishing the other floors." She stepped into the office, noticing how disheveled he looked up close. "Mr. Harmon, you really don't look well. Your face is even more red now." Richard pressed the handkerchief to his forehead again. "It's hot in here. Is the air conditioning not working?" Rosa glanced at the thermostat on the wall. "It's set to 68 degrees, same as always." She moved closer, concerned by his confusion. "The room isn't hot, Mr. Harmon, you are." He shook his head stubbornly. "I'm fine. Just need to finish this presentation." His words slurred slightly, and he reached for his water glass with an unsteady hand. Rosa noticed several empty antacid packets on his desk. "Have you been taking those for chest pain?" "Just some heartburn," Richard muttered, turning back to his computer. "Had spicy Thai food for lunch." Rosa thought of her father again, how he'd blamed his symptoms on her mother's cooking. "Mr. Harmon, my father said the same thing before his heart attack. He kept taking antacids thinking it was just heartburn." Richard's expression hardened. "I don't mean to be rude, Rosa, but I really need to focus. The board meeting is at 8 tomorrow morning, and I still have to finalize these projections." "The meeting won't matter if you're in the hospital," Rosa said, her concern overriding her usual deference. "Please, let me call someone for you." "A doctor, or maybe your wife?" "I'm divorced," Richard replied automatically. Then he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but I know my body. It's just stress and maybe a touch of indigestion. I'll be fine once this merger is finalized." Rosa stood her ground. "My father thought he knew his body too. He ignored all the warning signs. By the time he admitted something was wrong, the heart attack had already done damage." She took a deep breath. "I don't want to overstep, but I've been cleaning offices for almost 20 years. I notice things. And right now I'm noticing that you look exactly like my father did the night before he collapsed." Something in her tone must have gotten through to Richard. He studied her face for a moment, then glanced down at his hand, which was unconsciously rubbing his left shoulder again. "You really think it could be my heart?" His voice was quieter now, less certain. "I'm not a doctor," Rosa said, "but yes, I'm worried it could be. The hospital is only 3 blocks away. You could get checked out and be back in an hour if it's nothing." Richard seemed to consider this, but then his computer chimed with an incoming email. His attention immediately shifted back to the screen. "It's from the board chairman," he murmured, clicking to open it. "He wants the final numbers tonight." Rosa watched as Richard was pulled back into his work, the brief moment of concern forgotten. He began typing rapidly, his focus entirely on the email. She stood there for a moment longer, feeling helpless. She couldn't force him to go to the hospital. She couldn't make him take his symptoms seriously. "Mr. Harmon," she tried once more, "at least call your doctor. Describe your symptoms and see what he says." Richard barely looked up. "I will, later, after I send these numbers." Rosa knew that later probably meant never. She'd heard that promise from her father too many times. Still, she had done all she could. She wasn't family. She wasn't even a proper employee of Apex. She was just the cleaning lady. "I'll bring you some more ice water before I go," she said, taking his pitcher to refill it. When she returned with the water, Richard was on the phone, speaking intensely to someone about market projections and quarterly earnings. He nodded a thanks to her as she set down the pitcher, but his attention remained fixed on the call. Rosa noticed that he had opened his desk drawer and taken out more antacids. She placed a small note next to the water pitcher. On it, she had written, "Heart attack warning signs, chest pain or pressure, pain in arms, especially left, shortness of breath, cold sweat, nausea, dizziness. If you feel these, call 911 hospital, 3 blocks east, ER entrance on ground floor." Richard glanced at the note while still on the phone. For a second, Rosa thought she saw a flicker of concern cross his face, but then he was back to discussing profit margins and market share. There was nothing more she could do. Reluctantly, Rosa gathered her cleaning supplies and headed for the door. At the threshold, she turned back one last time. "Good night, Mr. Harmon." Please take care of yourself. Richard gave her a distracted wave, still deep in conversation about the merger. As Rosa made her way to the service elevator, a heavy feeling settled in her chest. She thought about calling security, asking them to check on Richard periodically through the night. But what would she say? That the CEO looked flushed? That he was taking antacids? That she had a bad feeling based on what happened to her father years ago? They would think she was overreacting, or worse, trying to insert herself into the affairs of someone far above her station. The security guard at the lobby desk looked up as Rosa signed out. "Everything okay, Rosa? You look worried." Rosa hesitated. "Mr. Harmon is still working upstairs. He doesn't look well, his face is very red and he keeps rubbing his left arm." The guard, his name tag read Tom, shrugged. "That's normal for him before big meetings. Works himself to the bone, that one. Don't worry about it, but what if it's his heart?" Rosa persisted. Tom smiled patronizingly. "Mr. Harmon has the best health insurance money can buy. If he thought something was wrong, he'd call his private doctor." He chuckled. "Besides, heart problems? The man's a fitness nut when he's not working. Runs marathons for charity. He's probably just stressed about tomorrow's meeting." Rosa hadn't known about the marathons. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe Richard really did just have heartburn from spicy food. Still, the image of him wincing and rubbing his shoulder wouldn't leave her mind. "Could you maybe check on him later?" she asked. "Just to make sure he's okay?" Tom nodded, more to humor her than out of real concern. "Sure, I'll swing by his office during my rounds. But I'm telling you, the man practically lives here before big meetings. This is nothing new." Rosa thanked him and headed out into the cool night air. The bus stop was 2 blocks away, and as she walked, she kept thinking about Richard. Perhaps she should have been more insistent. Perhaps she should have called 911 herself. But who was she to make that decision for him? A man in his position surely knew the risks. If he said he was fine, who was she to argue? The bus was late, giving Rosa more time to second-guess herself. As she waited, she took out her phone and searched for heart attack symptoms to see if she had missed anything. The list that appeared matched what she already knew: chest pain or discomfort, shortness of breath, pain in the arms, back, neck, or jaw, cold sweat, nausea, lightheadedness. Richard had been showing at least some of these signs. Her finger hovered over the 911 button. She could call them anonymously, tell them a man at Apex Technologies might be having a heart attack. But what if she was wrong? What if emergency services rushed in, only to find Richard perfectly fine and angry at the interruption? She could lose her job. The cleaning company could lose its contract with Apex. The bus arrived and Rosa boarded with a heavy heart. As the city lights flashed by the window, she sent up a silent prayer for Richard. She hoped that he would realize the danger he was in and seek help. She hoped that Tom would check on him during his rounds and recognize the seriousness of the situation. Most of all, she hoped that tomorrow, when the news of the merger broke, Richard would be there to see it. Healthy and whole, but deep down, Rosa couldn't shake the feeling that she was witnessing history repeat itself. Just like with her father, warnings were being ignored, symptoms dismissed, danger minimized, and just like with her father, the outcome could be devastating. The bus turned a corner, and Rosa could see the towering Apex building receding in the distance. Richard's office still lit up on the 32nd floor. She wondered if he was still working, still pushing himself despite his body's warning signs. She wondered if he had even read her note about heart attack symptoms. "Please, God," she whispered, "don't let him end up like Papa." When Rosa arrived home to her small apartment 20 minutes later, her 18-year-old daughter, Lucia, was at the kitchen table, textbook spread out around her. "You're late," Lucia observed, not looking up from her biology notes. "Bus problems again?" Rosa set down her purse and jacket. "No, I was worried about someone at work. The CEO doesn't look well, but he won't listen." Now Lucia looked up, curious. "The CEO? Of that big tech company? You talked to him?" "I clean his office every night," Rosa explained, moving to the refrigerator to find something for a late dinner. Tonight his face was all red, and he kept holding his chest and rubbing his arm. "I think he might be having heart problems like your grandfather did." Lucia frowned. "Did you tell him to go to the hospital?" "Of course I did," Rosa sighed, taking out leftover chicken and rice. "But he's too busy with some big meeting tomorrow. He thinks it's just stress or heartburn." "That's stupid," Lucia said bluntly. Rich people think they're immortal or something. Rosa shook her head as she heated her dinner in the microwave. Everyone thinks they're immortal until they're not. Your grandfather was the same way, too stubborn to admit anything was wrong until it was almost too late. At least Abuelo survived his heart attack, Lucia pointed out. Barely, Rosa said, and he was never the same afterward. She sat down at the table with her warmed-up plate. I'm worried about this man, Richard. He has a daughter, I think. I saw her picture on his desk. Lucia returned to her biology textbook. Well, you warned him. That's all you could do. It's his choice if he wants to ignore it. Rosa picked at her food, her appetite diminished by worry. I know. I just keep thinking about how I'll feel if I read in the newspaper tomorrow that he had a heart attack. Like I should have done more. Mom, Lucia said firmly, you did what you could. You're not responsible for some rich guy who won't listen to good advice. She tapped her textbook. Actually, we just covered the cardiovascular system in biology. Want to know something interesting? People often ignore heart attack symptoms because they don't match what they expect. They think it's always going to be like in the movies, clutching the chest and falling over. But sometimes it's more subtle. Rosa looked at her daughter with pride. Lucia was the first in their family to go to college, studying to become a nurse. Maybe you should have been there to tell him that. He might have listened to someone with medical knowledge, Lucia shrugged. Probably not. People hear what they want to hear. She turned a page in her textbook. But if he does have a heart attack and survives, maybe he'll listen next time. That's what happened with Abuelo, right? Yes, Rosa said quietly. After the heart attack, he finally started taking care of himself. But it shouldn't take nearly dying to make someone value their health. Later that night, as Rosa prepared for bed, she found herself checking her phone for news alerts about Apex Technologies or Richard Harmon. There was nothing. Perhaps that was a good sign. Perhaps Richard had finally recognized the seriousness of his symptoms and sought help. Or perhaps he was still in his office, working through the night, ignoring the warning signs as his condition worsened. Rosa set her alarm for her early morning cleaning shift at another office building. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thoughts were of Richard alone in his glass office and of her father, who had waited too long to call for help. She hoped that history wasn't repeating itself, that Richard would make a different choice than her father had, but deep down, she feared that by the time the sun rose, it might already be too late. After Rosa left, Richard Harmon sat alone in his vast corner office, surrounded by the silence that only comes in corporate buildings late at night. The cleaning lady's warnings echoed in his mind, briefly competing with thoughts of tomorrow's merger presentation, but he pushed them aside. He had no time for health scares, not with so much on the line. The merger with TechVision had been his vision for over a year now. If successful, it would cement Apex Technologies as a market leader and secure his legacy as CEO. The board had been skeptical at first, concerned about the cost and potential culture clash between the companies. Tomorrow's presentation was his chance to prove them wrong, to show them the projected growth figures that would make their doubts vanish. Richard loosened his collar further and reached for the water pitcher Rosa had left. The cool liquid provided momentary relief as he swallowed, but the burning sensation in his chest returned almost immediately. He popped 2 more antacids, grimacing at the chalky taste. Just indigestion, he muttered to himself, repeating it like a mantra. That Thai place always does this to me. He turned back to his computer, squinting slightly as the numbers on the spreadsheet seemed to blur. He blinked hard, trying to clear his vision. The financial projections for the third quarter post-merger needed final adjustments. The board would scrutinize every detail, looking for any reason to delay or reject the proposal. As Richard typed, a sharp pain shot through his left shoulder and down his arm. He gasped, his fingers freezing over the keyboard. For a few seconds, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then slowly, the pain subsided to a dull ache. He reached for the note Rosa had left. Heart attack warning signs. Pain in the left arm was listed right there, along with chest pressure, shortness of breath, and cold sweat. All symptoms he was experiencing to some degree. Coincidence, he told himself. Crumpling the note and tossing it toward the trash bin, it missed, landing on the floor instead. I pulled a muscle at the gym yesterday. That's all. The phone on his desk rang, startling him. The caller ID showed it was Lisa Chen, his VP of operations and the person who'd been working closest with him on the merger. Lisa, he answered. trying to keep his voice steady. "You're working late, too." "Just reviewing the presentation one last time," Lisa replied. "How are the final numbers looking?" Richard glanced at his screen. "Good. Better than good. The projected savings from combined R&D alone should make the board salivate." "That's what we want to hear," Lisa said. "Are you feeling okay, Richard? You sound a bit off." Richard straightened in his chair as if Lisa could see him through the phone. "I'm fine. Just tired. Been at this for 14 hours straight. Maybe you should get some rest. The presentation is at 8 and you need to be sharp." "I will. Soon. Just need to finish these last projections." Another twinge in his chest made him wince, but he kept his voice neutral. "Don't stay too much longer," Lisa cautioned. "We need you at your best tomorrow." After hanging up, Richard leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. The pain in his chest was constant now, a pressure that made it difficult to take deep breaths. He thought about Rosa's concerned face, about her story of her father's heart attack. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. What if she was right? What if this wasn't just stress and heartburn? What if he was actually having heart problems? He shook his head firmly. No, he couldn't afford to think that way, not now. He was only 52, ran 3 times a week, and had passed his executive physical 3 months ago with flying colors. His cholesterol was slightly elevated, but the doctor hadn't seemed concerned. This had to be stress, maybe a panic attack at worst. Richard forced himself to refocus on the spreadsheet. The sooner he finished, the sooner he could go home and get some sleep. He'd feel better in the morning. He always did. By 11 o'clock, Richard's shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool office temperature. The pain in his chest had spread to his jaw, creating a strange tingling sensation. His left arm felt heavy and numb. Each of these symptoms alone might not have alarmed him, but together they formed a pattern that was becoming harder to ignore. He thought about calling his doctor, but glanced at the time and reconsidered. What would Dr. Patel do at this hour anyway? Tell him to go to the emergency room? He couldn't afford that kind of disruption, not tonight. Instead, Richard decided it was finally time to call it a night. He saved his work, sent the completed presentation to himself and Lisa, and shut down his computer. Standing up made him dizzy, and he had to grip the edge of his desk until the sensation passed. Walking to the elevator seemed to take more effort than usual. By the time he reached the parking garage, Richard was breathing heavily, as if he'd run a marathon instead of walking a few hundred feet. Inside his Tesla, the air conditioning felt good against his flushed skin. He sat for a minute, trying to gather his strength before driving home. The garage was empty except for a few cars belonging to the night security staff. No one was around to notice how he slumped in the driver's seat, eyes closed, fighting waves of nausea. Just get home, he told himself. Take some aspirin and sleep it off. The drive to his West Side condo usually took 15 minutes at this hour, with minimal traffic. Tonight it felt like an eternity. Richard had to concentrate on each movement, each turn. Twice he nearly missed his exit because his mind felt foggy, his reactions delayed. When he finally pulled into his reserved parking space, relief washed over him. He'd made it home. Now he just needed to get upstairs to his condo, take some medicine, and collapse into bed. The elevator ride to the 22nd floor was a blur. Richard leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, trying to ignore how the simple act of standing upright had become a challenge. His keycard fumbled in his shaking hands as he tried to unlock his door. Inside, he didn't bother turning on lights beyond the dim hallway sconce. He made his way to the bathroom, opening the medicine cabinet with trembling fingers. He swallowed 2 aspirin with tap water, then looked at his reflection in the mirror. Even in the muted lighting, he could see how bad he looked. His face was alarmingly red, his eyes bloodshot. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air of his condo. For a moment, clarity broke through his denial. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just stress or indigestion or a pulled muscle. Something was seriously wrong. Richard reached for his phone, thinking he should call someone. 911, his doctor, even his daughter in Boston. But as he pulled the phone from his pocket, another wave of pain hit him, stronger than before. It felt like an elephant was sitting on his chest, crushing the air from his lungs. He gasped, dropping the phone on the bathroom floor. The pain radiated, through his chest, down his left arm, up into his jaw. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. "Heart attack," he whispered. Rosa's warnings finally breaking through his stubborn denial. "I'm having a heart attack." Richard staggered from the bathroom toward his bedroom, thinking vaguely of reaching the landline phone on his nightstand. He made it halfway across the living room before his legs gave out. He collapsed onto the plush carpet, pain searing through his chest like fire. His last coherent thought before consciousness fled was regret. Regret that he hadn't listened to the cleaning lady who had seen the warning signs. Regret that his stubbornness might cost him his life. Regret that he might never see his daughter again. Then darkness claimed him, and Richard Harmon, CEO of Apex Technologies, lay motionless on his living room floor, alone in his luxury condo, with no one aware of his condition. Hours passed. Outside, the city continued its nocturnal rhythm. Cars, honking, late-night revelers laughing, emergency sirens wailing in the distance. Inside Richard's condo, all was still and silent. His phone, lying forgotten on the bathroom floor, occasionally lit up with notifications. Emails from board members with last-minute questions about tomorrow's presentation. A text from Lisa confirming she'd received the final slides. A missed call from his daughter Catherine, who had wanted to wish him luck for the big meeting. None of these reached Richard as he lay unconscious, his body fighting a battle his mind had refused to acknowledge. His heart, stressed beyond its limits, struggled to maintain its rhythm while damaged muscle tissue cried out for oxygen that wasn't coming. At 3:17 a.m., Richard briefly regained consciousness. The pain in his chest had subsided somewhat, replaced by a profound weakness that made even lifting his head impossible. He realized he was on the floor but couldn't remember how he'd gotten there or how long he'd been lying there. With tremendous effort, he rolled onto his side, trying to orient himself. His condo was dark except for the dim light spilling from the bathroom doorway. His phone was nowhere in sight. The landline on his nightstand might as well have been on another continent. Richard attempted to call out, but his voice emerged as a feeble whisper that wouldn't carry beyond his living room, let alone to neighbors who might help. His condo's excellent soundproofing, once a selling point, now seemed like a cruel joke. He tried dragging himself toward the coffee table where another phone might be, but even that small movement sent fresh waves of pain through his chest. Dark spots clouded his vision again, and he felt consciousness slipping away. Before darkness reclaimed him, one clear thought surfaced in Richard's mind. Rosa had been right. She had seen the signs, had tried to warn him, but he'd been too stubborn, too focused on the merger to listen. Now he might die alone on his living room floor, all because he couldn't admit that a cleaning lady might know something he didn't. The irony wasn't lost on him as consciousness faded once more. Throughout his career, Richard had prided himself on recognizing talent and insight regardless of where it came from. He'd promoted people from the mailroom to management because he saw potential in them. He'd implemented suggestion boxes and open-door policies to ensure good ideas weren't missed because of hierarchy. Yet when his own life was at stake, he'd dismissed Rosa's concerns because of who she was. Just the cleaning lady, someone whose job was to empty trash bins and wipe down surfaces, not to give medical advice to executives. If he survived this, Richard promised himself hazily, he would never make that mistake again. He would listen, truly listen, to everyone, regardless of their position or background. He would recognize that wisdom and insight could come from anywhere, and that ignoring them because of prejudice or pride could have devastating consequences. As Richard drifted back into unconsciousness, the digital clock on his kitchen wall silently ticked over to 3:30 a.m. The board meeting was scheduled to begin in 4.5 hours. The merger presentation that had consumed Richard's attention, that had seemed so critically important just hours ago, now seemed trivial compared to the simple act of surviving until morning. Outside, the night sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly as dawn approached. Traffic sounds increased gradually as early commuters began their day. Inside Richard's condo, all remained still and silent as the CEO of Apex Technologies fought for his life, alone and unreachable. At 6:00 a.m., Richard's alarm clock began to blare in his bedroom, the sound muffled but persistent through the closed door. It rang for 10 minutes before automatically shutting off, its alert unheeded. At 6:15 a.m., Richard's phone began to ring in the bathroom where it had fallen. Lisa Chen was calling to confirm he was awake and preparing for the meeting. After several rings, the call went to voicemail. "Richard, it's Lisa. Just checking in before the meeting. Give me a call when you get this. Coffee will be waiting in the conference room." At 6:45 a.m., Lisa called again, this time with a slight edge of concern in her voice when she left another message. "Richard, it's Lisa again. Haven't heard from you. The board is gathering early for coffee before the presentation. Please call me back as soon as possible." At 7:30 a.m., with the meeting scheduled to begin in 30 minutes and no word from Richard, Lisa's concern turned to alarm. It wasn't like him to be unreachable on such an important day. After a third unanswered call, she contacted Richard's executive assistant, Diane. "Have you heard from Richard this morning?" Lisa asked when Diane answered. "No," Diane replied, concern evident in her voice. "He always calls by 7 on board meeting days. I've tried his cell and his home number, but no answer." "This isn't like him," Lisa said. "Especially not today. The merger presentation is at 8 and he's been working toward this for over a year." "Should I call his building?" Diane suggested. "Maybe the doorman can check on him." "Yes, do that right away," Lisa agreed. "And let me know as soon as you hear anything. I'll stall the board if necessary, but we can't proceed without him." At 7:45 a.m., Diane called the front desk at Richard's luxury condo building. The morning doorman, Victor, agreed to check on Mr. Harmon immediately. Victor had worked in the building for 5 years and knew Richard's habits well. The CEO was typically up before dawn, often leaving for the office by 6:30 a.m., especially on important days. The fact that his car was still in its parking space and he hadn't been seen leaving the building was concerning. Victor used his master key to enter Richard's condo after repeated knocks went unanswered. The unit was dark and quiet as he stepped inside, calling out Richard's name. When he received no response, Victor moved further into the apartment, turning on lights as he went. He found Richard unconscious on the living room floor, his skin pale and clammy, his breathing shallow and irregular. Victor immediately called 911, reporting a medical emergency. "I need an ambulance right away," he told the dispatcher. "One of our residents is unconscious. I think he might have had a heart attack." As the dispatcher asked questions about Richard's condition, Victor checked for a pulse, finding it weak and erratic. Following the dispatcher's instructions, he loosened Richard's tie and collar and positioned him on his back. "The ambulance is on its way," the dispatcher assured him. "Keep monitoring his breathing and pulse until they arrive." Victor then called down to the front desk, instructing the concierge to direct the paramedics up immediately upon arrival and to notify Richard's emergency contact. 8 minutes later, paramedics rushed into the condo, quickly taking over Richard's care. They confirmed Victor's suspicion. Richard appeared to be suffering from a heart attack. They worked efficiently, attaching monitors, starting an IV, and preparing him for transport. "How long has he been like this?" one paramedic asked Victor. "I don't know," Victor admitted. "I just found him this way a few minutes ago. But his car was here all night, and no one saw him leave the building yesterday evening, so it's possible he's been like this for hours." The paramedic's expression grew more serious. "The sooner we get him to the hospital, the better. Time is muscle when it comes to heart attacks." As they wheeled Richard out on a stretcher, he remained unconscious, unaware of the activity around him, unaware that help had finally arrived, unaware that the board meeting he'd been so focused on was about to begin without him. Meanwhile, at Apex Technologies headquarters, the board members had gathered in the conference room. Lisa Chen stood at the front explaining the situation. "We're still trying to reach Richard," she told them. "We've sent someone to check on him at his condo. In the meantime, I suggest we postpone the presentation until we know more." The board chairman, Harold Thompson, frowned. "This merger discussion has already been delayed twice. The TechVision CEO is expecting our decision by noon." "I understand," Lisa said firmly. "But Richard is the architect of this merger. He's been working on it for over a year. We should wait." Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Diane. Lisa excused herself and stepped out of the conference room to take it. "They found him," Diane said, her voice shaking. "He's unconscious. The paramedics think it's a heart attack. They're taking him to Metropolitan Hospital right now. Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. How bad is it? They don't know yet. The doorman said he might have been like that all night. All night. The words echoed in Lisa's mind as she remembered their phone conversation the previous evening. Richard had sounded strange, his voice strained. Had he already been experiencing symptoms then? Had he driven home in that condition? I'll tell the board, Lisa said. Then I'm going to the hospital. She returned to the conference room where board members were checking their watches and murmuring among themselves. All conversation stopped when they saw her expression. Richard has been taken to Metropolitan Hospital, she announced. It appears he's had a heart attack. His condition is unknown at this time. The room erupted in shocked exclamations and concerned questions. Harold Thompson raised his hands for quiet. This is terrible news, he said. Our first concern, of course, is Richard's health. The merger discussion can wait. Lisa nodded gratefully. I'm heading to the hospital now. I'll update everyone as soon as I know more. As she gathered her things and rushed toward the elevator, Lisa couldn't help but think about the merger presentation sitting unused on the conference room table. All those numbers, projections, and strategies that had seemed so important yesterday now seemed trivial compared to Richard's life hanging in the balance. The irony wasn't lost on her. Richard had pushed himself to the brink, working obsessively on a business deal, only to miss it entirely because his body had finally rebelled against the strain he'd put it under. Lisa wondered if anyone had seen the warning signs, if anyone had tried to tell Richard to slow down or take care of himself. Had there been red flags that they'd all missed, too caught up in the daily business of running a company to notice their leader was in trouble? As the elevator descended to the lobby, Lisa made a silent promise to herself and to Richard. When he recovered, things would be different. The company culture would change. Health and well-being would become priorities, not just corporate buzzwords in the employee handbook. But first, Richard had to survive. And as Lisa hailed a taxi to the hospital, that was far from certain. The fluorescent lights of Metropolitan Hospital's emergency department cast harsh shadows as paramedics rushed Richard Harmon through the automatic doors. His unconscious form lay strapped to a gurney, an oxygen mask covering his face, felines already running into his arms. Male 52, possible myocardial infarction, the lead paramedic reported to the waiting emergency team. Found unconscious in his home. Unknown how long he's been down. Pulse is weak and irregular. Blood pressure 90/60 and falling. Dr. Priya Sharma, the attending emergency physician, quickly assessed the situation. Get him to Trauma 1. I want a 12-lead EKG, cardiac enzymes, and call cardiology for an immediate consult. The team moved with practiced efficiency, transferring Richard from the gurney to the hospital bed. Nurses cut away his sweat-soaked undershirt while a technician attached EKG leads to his chest. A phlebotomist drew blood samples for testing while Dr. Sharma listened to Richard's heart and lungs. EKG shows ST elevation in leads V1 through V4, a nurse called out. Consistent with anterior wall MI. Dr. Sharma nodded grimly. Let's get cardiology down here now. He needs an emergency catheterization, and someone find out who this patient is and contact his family. In the waiting room, Lisa Chen paced anxiously. She had arrived shortly after the ambulance, having followed it from Richard's condo building. Now she waited for news, any news about her boss's condition. A hospital social worker approached her. Are you here for Mr. Harmon? Lisa nodded. Yes, I'm Lisa Chen, Executive Vice President at Apex Technologies. Richard is our CEO. Are you family? The social worker asked. No, but I'm probably the closest thing here right now. His daughter is in Boston. I've been trying to reach her. The social worker nodded. I understand. The medical team is working with him now. Do you know if Mr. Harmon has any medical conditions or allergies? Lisa shook her head. Not that I'm aware of. He seemed healthy. He exercises regularly, though he does work long hours under a lot of stress. She hesitated. We had a major board meeting scheduled for this morning. He's been working nonstop on a merger presentation. I see, the social worker said. And when did you last speak with him? Last night around 11 p.m. he was still at the office. He sounded tired. Maybe a bit off, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Lisa's voice cracked slightly. I should have noticed something was wrong. Try not to blame yourself, the social worker advised gently. Heart attacks can be difficult to recognize even for the person experiencing them. At that moment, Lisa's phone rang. It was Catherine, Richard's 24-year-old daughter. "Lisa, what's happening? I got your messages about Dad." Catherine's voice was tight with fear. "Catherine, I'm at Metropolitan Hospital. Your father appears to have had a heart attack. They're working on him now." "A heart attack?" Catherine's voice rose. "But he's so careful about his health. He just ran that charity half-marathon last month, I know. It's shocking to all of us." Lisa tried to keep her voice steady. "How quickly can you get here?" "I'm already looking at flights. There's one leaving Logan in 2 hours. I could be there by early afternoon." "I'll send a car to meet you at the airport," Lisa promised. "And Catherine. I'll stay here until you arrive. He won't be alone." After hanging up, Lisa sank into a waiting room chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting her full force. Richard Harmon, the seemingly invincible CEO who pushed himself and everyone around him to excellence, was fighting for his life. The merger that had consumed their attention for months now seemed insignificant in comparison. Lisa's phone buzzed continuously, with messages from board members and executives wanting updates on both Richard's condition and the status of the merger. She responded as best she could, trying to balance corporate responsibilities with the human crisis unfolding before her. Inside Trauma Room 1, the cardiac team worked feverishly to stabilize Richard. Dr. Sharma conferred with Dr. Aidan Wilson, the cardiologist who had arrived minutes earlier. "Anterior wall MI with possible right ventricle involvement," Dr. Sharma explained, pointing to the EKG readout. "His troponin levels are significantly elevated, suggesting extensive cardiac damage." Dr. Wilson studied the EKG. "How long was he down before being found?" "Unknown. Doorman found him unconscious on his living room floor. Based on when he was last seen and his car's presence in the garage, it could have been hours." Dr. Wilson's expression grew more concerned. "That's not good. Time is muscle in cardiac events. The longer the heart muscle goes without proper blood flow, the more permanent damage occurs." He turned to the nurse. "Let's get him to the cath lab immediately. We need to find and open the blockage." As they prepared to move Richard, his eyelids fluttered. For the first time since being found, he showed signs of consciousness. "Mr. Harmon." Dr. Sharma leaned over him. "Can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You've had a heart attack." Richard's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening. He tried to speak but was hindered by the oxygen mask. "Don't try to talk," Dr. Sharma advised. "Just nod if you understand me." Richard gave a slight nod, wincing as pain shot through his chest. "We're taking you to a special procedure room to treat your heart attack," Dr. Sharma explained. "Dr. Wilson here is a cardiologist. He's going to open the blocked artery that caused your heart attack." Richard's eyes widened with comprehension and fear. This was real. He was having a heart attack. The cleaning lady had been right. As they wheeled him toward the elevator, Richard caught sight of Lisa in the waiting room. He weakly raised his hand, trying to signal her. She rushed over, relief washing over her face at seeing him conscious. "Richard, thank God you're awake." She grabbed his hand. "Catherine's on her way. Everything's going to be okay." Richard pulled the oxygen mask aside momentarily. "The meeting," he whispered. "Don't worry about that," Lisa assured him. "Everyone understands. The merger can wait." "Tell the cleaning lady," Richard managed before a nurse gently replaced his oxygen mask. "What?" Lisa looked confused. "What cleaning lady?" But they were already moving Richard into the elevator, leaving Lisa standing there puzzled by his strange request. In the cardiac catheterization lab, Richard drifted in and out of consciousness as the team prepared him for the procedure. They injected local anesthesia into his wrist, then inserted a thin catheter into his radial artery. Dr. Wilson would thread this catheter through Richard's arterial system up to his heart, injecting dye to visualize the blockage, then use a tiny balloon and stent to open the clogged artery. "Stay with us." "Mr. Harmon," Dr. Wilson encouraged as he worked. "You're doing great." Richard tried to focus on the doctor's voice, but his mind kept drifting to Rosa, the cleaning lady who had warned him. Her concerned face floated before him, how she had noticed his flushed appearance, how she had urged him to seek help, how she had even written down the warning signs of a heart attack, signs he had stubbornly ignored. If he survived this, he promised himself hazily, he would thank her. He would make sure she knew that she had been right, that her concern had mattered, even if he had been too proud and too busy to listen at the time. On the monitors surrounding Richard, images of his heart appeared as Dr. Wilson injected contrast dye. The problem became immediately apparent: a complete blockage in the left anterior descending artery, often ominously called the widowmaker, due to the high mortality rate associated with blockages there. There it is. Dr. Wilson pointed to the screen. 100% occlusion of the LAD. No wonder he's in such bad shape. He turned to Richard. Mr. Harmon, I'm going to open this blockage now. You might feel some pressure, but it shouldn't hurt. Richard nodded weakly, trying to stay conscious despite the sedatives flowing through his system. He wanted to know what was happening, wanted to witness the procedure that might save his life or fail to undo the damage his stubbornness had caused. Dr. Wilson worked methodically, threading a tiny balloon to the site of the blockage, then inflating it to crush the plaque against the artery walls. Next came a mesh stent, a tiny tube that would hold the artery open and allow blood to flow freely again to Richard's oxygen-starved heart muscle. Stent deployed, Dr. Wilson announced. Let's get some post-procedure images. The monitors showed blood flowing through the previously blocked artery, bringing much-needed oxygen to Richard's heart. But the damage had been done. Hours without proper blood flow had killed some heart muscle. The question now was how much. Good flow through the LAD, Dr. Wilson noted with satisfaction. But given the delay in treatment, we're looking at significant myocardial damage. His heart function will be compromised. In the cardiac intensive care unit, Richard was settled into a private room, surrounded by monitoring equipment that tracked every heartbeat, every breath, every fluctuation in his vital signs. The immediate danger had passed, but recovery would be a long and uncertain road. Lisa sat beside his bed, having promised Catherine she would stay until she arrived. Richard drifted in and out of sleep, the powerful medications and his body's trauma taking their toll. During one of his wakeful periods, Richard turned to Lisa. "What time is it?" he asked, his voice weak. "Almost noon," Lisa replied. "How are you feeling?" "Like an elephant is sitting on my chest," Richard admitted. "The merger meeting—" "Don't worry about that," Lisa said firmly. "The board has postponed the discussion until you're better." Richard shook his head slightly. "Can't wait. Tech vision won't hold forever." "Richard, you nearly died," Lisa reminded him. "You're in the cardiac ICU. The merger isn't important right now." "It is," he insisted. "Too much work. Too many jobs at stake." He tried to sit up but fell back, wincing. "Please stay still," Lisa urged. "The doctor said you need to rest." Richard closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his strength. "Present it for me," he said finally. "You know the numbers as well as I do. Use my slides. Tell the board." He paused, breathing heavily. "Tell them I believe in this merger with my whole heart. What's left of it anyway?" A ghost of his old wry smile crossed his face. Lisa squeezed his hand. "I'll do it, but only if you promise to focus on getting better." "I promise." Richard's expression grew serious. "Lisa, there was a cleaning lady at the office last night, Rosa. She warned me. Said I looked like I was having heart problems. I ignored her." Lisa's eyes widened in recognition. "Is that what you meant earlier? About telling the cleaning lady?" Richard nodded. "Find her. Tell her she was right. If I'd listened—" He left the thought unfinished. "I will," Lisa promised. "Now rest. Catherine will be here soon." As Richard drifted back to sleep, Lisa stepped out to make calls. First to the board, arranging for the merger presentation to proceed later that afternoon with her standing in for Richard. Then to Apex's facilities management, trying to identify the cleaning lady named Rosa who had been working the previous night. Back at Apex Technologies, the news of Richard's heart attack had spread quickly. Employees gathered in small groups, discussing the shocking development in hushed tones. Richard had always seemed invincible, a force of nature who drove the company forward through sheer will and determination. The idea that he could be felled by something as common as a heart attack was difficult to process. In the executive suite, Diane, Richard's assistant, fielded calls from concerned clients, partners, and press. The company's PR team had released a brief statement confirming Richard's hospitalization and asking for privacy. But rumors and speculation were already swirling on business news sites and social media. When Lisa called, Diane jumped on the request to find Rosa immediately. "I'll contact facilities management right away," she promised. "How is Richard doing?" "Stable but serious," Lisa replied. The cardiologist said if he'd gotten help sooner, the damage would have been less severe. That's why finding this cleaning lady is so important to him. Apparently, she warned him he might be having heart problems, but he didn't listen. Diane's voice softened. "That sounds like Richard. Too stubborn for his own good sometimes." After several calls, Diane identified the cleaning company contracted for the executive floor. A quick conversation with their supervisor confirmed that Rosa Mendez had indeed been working at Apex the previous night. She was currently assigned to another building but would be back at Apex that evening. Meanwhile, at Metropolitan Hospital, Catherine Harmon rushed into the cardiac ICU, her face pale with worry. Despite living her own life in Boston, where she worked as an environmental lawyer, she and her father had remained close after her parents' divorce 10 years earlier. The thought of losing him was unbearable. "Dad?" she whispered, approaching his bedside cautiously. Despite Lisa's updates, she wasn't prepared for how fragile her father looked. Surrounded by medical equipment, his face pale, dark circles under his eyes. Richard's eyes fluttered open at the sound of her voice. "Catherine," he smiled weakly. "You didn't need to come all this way." "Of course I did," she said, taking his hand. "You had a heart attack, Dad, a serious one. So they tell me." Richard tried to adjust his position and winced. "I'm sorry to worry you." Catherine shook her head, tears threatening. "When Lisa called, I thought—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I know." Richard squeezed her hand. "I thought the same thing when I collapsed in my condo. I thought I might never see you again." Catherine wiped away a tear. "The doctor outside said you were lucky. That if you had been found even an hour later, I know that too." Richard's expression grew somber. "Catherine, I've been thinking. If I make it through this—" "When you make it through this," Catherine corrected firmly. Richard smiled faintly. "When I make it through this, things are going to change. I've been so focused on work, on deals and mergers and stock prices. Last night, a cleaning lady at the office noticed I didn't look well. She warned me I might be having heart problems just like her father did. I dismissed her. Thought the merger was more important than my health." "Oh, Dad," Catherine sighed. This sounded exactly like her father. Brilliant in business, but sometimes blind to the human elements, including his own needs. "I want to thank her," Richard continued. "Lisa's trying to find her. But more than that, I want to learn from this. Life is fragile. More fragile than I realized." Catherine nodded, remembering all the milestones her father had missed over the years. School plays, swim meets, even her law school graduation, all sacrificed on the altar of corporate success. Perhaps this health crisis would finally make him reassess his priorities. As father and daughter talked quietly, Dr. Wilson entered the room to check on his patient. "Mr. Harmon, how are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Richard admitted. "But I'm alive thanks to you and your team." Dr. Wilson nodded, checking the monitors and Richard's most recent lab results. The procedure was successful in opening the blocked artery. "However, I need to be frank with you about the damage." Catherine gripped her father's hand tighter as Dr. Wilson continued. "Because of the delay in treatment, a significant portion of your heart muscle has been damaged. Your ejection fraction, the percentage of blood your heart pumps with each contraction, is currently at 35%. Normal is 55% or higher." Richard absorbed this information silently. Numbers had always made sense to him, had always told a clear story. These numbers were telling him his heart was functioning at just over half its normal capacity. "What does that mean for his recovery?" Catherine asked. "It means several things," Dr. Wilson explained. "First, he'll need to take medications to help his heart function and prevent another heart attack. Second, his activity will be limited, especially in the beginning. And third, he'll need to make significant lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, stress management." "What about work?" Richard asked. "When can I return?" Dr. Wilson's expression grew stern. "Mr. Harmon, you need to understand the seriousness of your condition. This wasn't a mild heart attack. It was major with substantial damage to your heart muscle. Some of that damage is permanent. Your recovery will take months, not days or weeks." Richard started to protest, but Catherine interrupted. "He'll take as much time as needed, doctor. I'll make sure of it." Dr. Wilson nodded approvingly. "Good. Now, we'll keep you in the cardiac ICU for at least 48 hours, then move you to a regular room if you remain stable. After discharge, you'll need cardiac rehabilitation and regular follow-up appointments. After the doctor left, Richard lay back against his pillows, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. His body had betrayed him, or perhaps more accurately, he had betrayed his body, pushing it beyond its limits, ignoring warning signs, prioritizing a business deal over his own health. The cleaning lady was right. He murmured more to himself than to Catherine. What cleaning lady? Catherine asked. Rosa. She saw the warning signs I ignored. If I'd listened to her. Richard's voice trailed off. Catherine squeezed his hand. Dad, you can't change what happened, but you can learn from it. Richard nodded slowly. I will. I promise. As the afternoon wore on, Richard drifted in and out of sleep. Catherine remained by his side, working remotely on her laptop when he slept, talking quietly with him when he was awake. Lisa called with updates on the merger presentation, which had gone well in Richard's absence. The board was impressed, Lisa reported. They've tentatively approved moving forward pending final review of the terms. Good, Richard said weakly. And Rosa, I found her. She'll be at the office tonight. I'm planning to speak with her then. Richard nodded, satisfied. Thank her for me. Tell her she was right and I should have listened. As evening approached, Richard's condition remained stable. The critical first 24 hours after a heart attack were passing without complications. A positive sign according to the nurses who regularly checked his vitals and adjusted his medications. In his moments of wakefulness, Richard found himself thinking about Rosa more and more. Not just about her warning, but about what she represented. She was someone he would normally have overlooked. Someone whose insight he would have dismissed because of her position. Yet she had seen what he couldn't or wouldn't see himself. If he recovered, when he recovered, Richard promised himself that would change. He would listen more and assume less. He would recognize that wisdom could come from unexpected sources. Most importantly, he would remember that no business deal, no merger, no corporate success was worth his life. His daughter was right. He couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the damage to his heart. But he could learn from it. He could face the future differently, if he got that chance. 2 weeks passed before Richard Harmon returned to Apex Technologies. The morning of his return was bright and clear, the kind of early autumn day that hinted at both summer's warmth and fall's crispness. As his driver pulled up to the gleaming glass tower that housed the company headquarters, Richard felt a strange mix of emotions. Eagerness to return to the world he knew, anxiety about his new limitations, and a humility that was unfamiliar to him. His cardiologist had cleared him for limited work hours, just 4 hours a day, 3 days a week to start. No stressful meetings, no working through lunch, no staying late to finish just one more thing. For a man who had routinely put in 12-hour days and worked most weekends, these restrictions felt like handcuffs. Yet Richard knew they were necessary. His heart, damaged by the attack, needed time to heal, time to adjust to its new reality. Lisa Chen met him in the lobby, her face lighting up at the sight of him. Richard, it's so good to see you here. Good to be here, he replied, surprised to find he meant it. After 2 weeks in the hospital and another week recovering at home, the familiar surroundings of Apex felt like a comfort. A return to normalcy, even if that normalcy was now drastically modified. As they rode the elevator to the executive floor, Lisa updated him on the merger progress. The final papers will be signed next week. Everything's on track just as you planned. Richard nodded, feeling an odd detachment from the news. Before his heart attack, this merger had consumed him, had seemed like the most important thing in the world. Now it felt like someone else's accomplishment, a distant concern compared to the simple fact of his continued existence. That's good, he said. And how are things otherwise? Lisa glanced at him, seeming to notice his shift in priorities. The company's running smoothly. We've implemented some of those wellness initiatives you mentioned from the hospital. Weekly yoga classes, healthier options in the cafeteria, standing desks for anyone who wants one. Good, Richard nodded. Then, trying to sound casual, he asked, Is Rosa here today? Lisa smiled knowingly. Yes, I made sure of it. She doesn't usually work mornings, but when I told her you wanted to see her, she arranged to switch shifts. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, and several employees stopped what they were doing to stare. Richard knew he looked different, thinner, paler, more fragile somehow. He'd lost 12 pounds during his hospital stay, and his tailored suit hung loosely on his frame, but he straightened his shoulders and nodded to his staff, determined to project strength even as he felt his heartbeat quicken with the simple exertion of walking. His office looked exactly as he'd left it that fateful night. Computer still in sleep mode, papers neatly stacked, family photo in its silver frame. Lisa had kept everything ready for his return, a gesture he appreciated more than she knew. "I've cleared your calendar until noon," she told him. "Just enough time to check emails and make a few calls." "Doctor's orders," Richard smiled. In the past, he might have bristled at such restrictions, might have insisted on diving right back into his full schedule. Now he felt grateful for the boundaries. "Thank you, Lisa, for everything." The merger, keeping things running, for finding Rosa. Lisa nodded. "She should be here soon. I told her to come to your office around 10. She hesitated, then added, "She was really worried about you, you know." When I told her what happened, she blamed herself for not being more insistent that night. Richard shook his head. "It wasn't her fault. She tried to warn me. I was too stubborn to listen." After Lisa left, Richard settled behind his desk, taking a moment to absorb the familiar surroundings. His office had always been his domain, the place where he felt most in control. Now it felt both comforting and slightly foreign, like returning to a childhood home as an adult. He opened his email, grimacing at the hundreds of unread messages that had accumulated, despite Lisa's best efforts to filter the most important ones. Before his heart attack, he would have dived in, working through them methodically until every last one was addressed. Now he set a timer on his phone, 30 minutes for email, no more. Another change, another adjustment to his new reality. At precisely 10 o'clock, there was a soft knock on his door. Richard looked up to see Rosa standing there looking nervous in her cleaning uniform, hands clasped in front of her. "Rosa," he said, rising carefully from his chair. "Please come in." She entered hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome in the CEO's office under these circumstances. "Mr. Harmon, it's good to see you back. How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks to you." Richard gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit down." Rosa perched on the edge of the chair, still looking uncomfortable. In all her years of cleaning offices, she had rarely been invited to sit down in one. Richard settled back into his own chair, taking a moment to find the right words. "Rosa, I owe you an apology." "And a thank you," she shook her head. "No, Mr. Harmon, you don't owe me anything." "I do," he insisted. "You saw what I refused to see. You tried to warn me, and I dismissed your concerns." He leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly. "The doctors told me that if I'd gotten help when you first noticed something was wrong, I might have avoided surgery altogether. The damage to my heart would have been minimal." Rosa's eyes grew sad. "That's what happened with my father. He waited too long, too. But he survived, and so did you. That's what matters," Richard nodded. "Yes, survival matters. But so does learning from our mistakes." He paused. "How did you know? What did you see that night that made you concerned?" Rosa considered the question. "Many small things. Your face was very red. You were sweating even though the office was cool. You kept rubbing your shoulder and chest. You seemed short of breath." She